Hey makeup friends, it is the beginning of a new month, which means that BH Cosmetics has recently released their Birthstone palette for the month of May, and that is the Emerald palette. We're going to talk about this palette today, and also I'm going to throw in a couple little comments about the newest brow product from ColourPop, as well as a new mascara from the brand SNAIL. Let's get into this. As always, I want to start off by welcoming you back to my channel, or if you are new here, then hello and welcome. My name is Kara, and on my channel, we like to mix beauty, brains, and the occasional F-bomb. The makeup that I'm wearing today, obviously I have the Emerald palette on my eyes, and I'm wearing the shade Modesty from MAC on my lips. If you're not aware, BH Cosmetics is releasing a 7-pan palette every month, and the color story is inspired by the birthstone for that month. So for the month of May, the birthstone is Emerald, and here we are with the Emerald palette. So let's take a look on the inside. Here's what she looks like. Now, when I saw pictures of this, I was very excited. I thought that this was just such a beautiful palette, and I was really excited to get my hands on it and play with it. You can see some of the swatches. We're going to get to that in a moment. Now, I don't want to bury the lead on this. These shadows work every bit as well as you would expect a BH Cosmetics shadow to work. The mattes are very blendable, but also very pigmented. The shimmer shadows, you can pick them up with a brush, you can apply them with a finger, and the only reason that I say that when I talk about shimmer shadows is because I have come across some before where they just do not adhere to a brush, and you have to use your finger. And while most times I don't mind using my finger, sometimes I do like to have the precision of using a smaller flat brush, as you'll see I did with this look, at least on this eye here. But when you can only pick it up with your finger, you lose some of that precision. So while it's not necessarily a deal breaker, it's something that I like to point out to you guys just so that you're aware of that. The palette also includes a pressed glitter, which is this shade called High Spirit. That seems to be a standing feature with these 7-pan palettes, is that there is at least one pressed glitter in them. Now this one, you can't see it from this distance, but it does have little bits of different colored glitter in there. So while it is mostly a copperish kind of tone, there are little specks of other colors in there. It's very, very subtle once it's applied to the lid. I have it in the center over here, but it is there nonetheless. So every now and then you can see it pick up a different color, which I think adds just a little bit of something extra to the glitter. I know I said I was going to get into the swatches. They're on my arm, but I took a video of it so that it's a little bit more up close without the light really bouncing off on it. If I bring my arm up close to the camera, it's just going to get washed out because the lights are so bright, and if I turn them down, then it's too dark. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So let's bring up the video of the swatches just so you can see how these shadows look. Keep in mind, I did use a primer on my arm before I did the swatches, and these are very heavily built up finger swatches. So you can achieve this kind of look on the eyes, but it's not going to come straight out of the pan this way. You do have to blend it and build up the pigmentation. That's not to say that the mattes are patchy in any way, but I just want to point that out because finger swatches do tend to be a little misleading, and I just want you to be aware that I did use a primer underneath these swatches and used my finger to build them up. Okay, so those are the swatches. I have now washed them off my arm because, as you can see, I am wearing a white shirt, which is a terrible idea when I have makeup sitting around, but I'm known for making terrible decisions every now and then. So, washed it off, let's move on. I'm going to talk about the shadows and how I applied them to my eyes, and I'm just going to scoot over a little bit so we can stick a little video up here so that you can see it in action as I'm talking, just so that this video is not, half an hour long. So for this eye here, I started off by applying the matte olive green shade, and I went in with a fairly light hand, but I did do some extra blending just to sheer it out a little bit. And then I went in with a slightly more precise brush and built up the pigmentation in the crease and towards the outer portion of my lid. On the center of the lid, I did a bit of a gradient between the two shimmer shadows here. So I put the darker one, Artsy AF, towards the outer portion of my lid, and then Emerald is what you're seeing on the inner half of my lid here. Then I just left it alone and moved over to the other eye. As you can see, I didn't have any concealer or foundation on, so I needed to get the upper lids done before I could move on to the rest and then finish it up with the lower lash line. So for the other eye, I went in with the shade Stubborn, which is the other matte in this palette. You can see that I blended it all throughout the crease and put it towards the outer portion of the lid as well as the inner so that I could have a bit of a halo eye going on. In the center, I did lay down this chocolatey sort of brown shimmer shadow here. This is called Hard Worker, and that was just so that the pressed glitter would have a bit of a base. Because sometimes pressed glitters can be a little bit sparse on the lid, I didn't want it to be just like bare skin underneath it. So I wanted to have a little bit of a base, and I wanted to use the shade, frankly, if only just to test it out, even though I largely covered it up at the end of the day. So then I went in with a bit of a glitter glue, patted that on top of that brown shimmer shadow, and then you can see that I put High Spirit, the pressed glitter, on top of that. And then I did my face. And then it was time to go in for the lower lash line. And I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. If I wanted to just do green with the green eye and red with the red eye, or switch them up, or just what, I didn't know what to do. So I hemmed and hawed for a bit, as one does, and I decided that I would put the red matte towards the inner half of the lower lash line, and then blend the green matte towards the outer half. And then I took a clean brush and just buffed those shadows, blended them in together, and sort of blew them out underneath the lash so that they weren't a harsh line. On this eye here, I went back in with that brown shimmer shadow called Hard Worker, and that is what I used to line my lower lash line. And I didn't find that it produced like a really satiny or shiny look underneath there. Most of the shine to it kind of blended away, really, which I'm not necessarily surprised by. A lot of shimmer shadows will do that. It's the base pigment that really shows through if you overblend. So I did intentionally overblend the lower lash line just so that it would look as matte as I can make a shimmer shadow look. For my inner corner then, I went in with this champagne shade here, Total Package, and that's what I used on the inner portion of my eyes as well as on my brows. Speaking of brows though, this is sort of a natural segue. Let's talk about the brow product that I used, and then we'll talk about the mascara, and then I'll give you my thoughts. That's how we're going to structure this. So the brow product is new from ColourPop. This is the Tinted Feather Effect Styling Wax. I have no idea what the shade name is that I bought, but it's a dark brown basically. And I got the little kit that came with the angled spoolie as well. Now I've never used a brow wax, so I'm not entirely sure of the correct way to use it. So I went in and I brushed my brows first, and then I dragged this like against the grain, I guess, and then laid it down. I think it worked out really nicely. I can feel product in the brow, but it's not crunchy. There's no like stickiness to it. I'm gonna do this really harshly. Yeah, like nothing is transferring off, and my brows are still where I put them like an hour ago when I first sat down to do my makeup. So I'm quite pleased with that. If you have tips or like pro tips on how to use this kind of product, please let me know, because I just felt like I was being like super aggressive, and maybe it's just because it's flat and this is flat, so it doesn't like, I don't know, it just felt unnatural somehow trying to pick the product up, because I'm basically just like scraping this thing across it. Is that what you do? Is there some secret to using this that I'm not aware of? Please fill me in. Also, if you can hear what sounds like a herd of elephants running overhead, those are my children. They've had their dessert, so sugar's in the bloodstream. I think Barry's going to take them out with the dog soon, but that's what that noise is anyways. I did not inherit large animals. Okay, at any rate, there's the ColourPop brow product for you. I do like the overall effect of it. I'm just not sure that I'm applying it properly, so I'm going to have to do some YouTube searching and see how other people have applied this, simply because I'm such a noob at it. So then really quickly, the mascara that I used is from the brand Say, and this is Mascara 101 in the shade Black. I'll give you a close-up of the wand because it's kind of interesting. It's one of those like rubberized bristles, but you can see it's got this like weird little spiky crown thing going on at the end. And I was a little concerned about that because honestly, it looks like it's going to hurt. However, I'm happy to say I didn't stab myself in the eye with it. It wasn't a problem. And I have to say it was actually quite helpful because I could get into like the very inner portion of those lashes, and I could also use it to like just add a little bit more separation amongst the lashes. Now this is just my first time using the mascaras, so I'm hesitant to give any sort of real formal review of it. I don't know how it wears, I don't know how it's going to wash off, anything of that sort. But I do find that it does add a lot of separation to my lashes and makes them look a little bit longer, although it doesn't really add a lot of volume to them. So take that for what it's worth, but I wanted you to see the mascara up close and just have very, very surface level initial impressions of it. Okay, so let's talk about this palette then. As you may know, I love BH Cosmetics. I have a ton of their palettes. I just recently put up a video ranking my entire BH Cosmetics collection, and I believe there was 21 palettes in there, and this makes 22. I feel that I'm very familiar with the BH Cosmetics formula, and the formula in this palette doesn't disappoint, and yet somehow I'm just not in love with this palette. The color story, or at least the overall big picture idea of the color story, really did draw me in, and I still think it's very beautiful. However, when it comes to the practicality of actually applying this palette, that's where I'm having issues. And I think the main culprit is the fact that there's only 2 mattes and they're both very deep in tone. Whereas they have a nice champagne in here, I can't really do much with it aside from highlighting or just putting it all over the lid. I can't blend out with it because it is very strongly shimmery. It's more shimmery than the brown that I was able to use on my lower lash line. And therefore I don't think that I can blend out with this because it's so strongly shimmery. So I really do wish that they had added one more matte in here. And frankly, I'm gonna go ahead and volunteer this shade here to be replaced with a matte because these ones are pretty similar. They're really not that far off from each other once they're applied to the lid. There's definitely differences between them. I mean, Emerald is a much brighter, almost Kelly green kind of shade, whereas Artsy AF is much more of an olive tone. But there's already an olive matte shade in here, so I don't feel we need an olive matte and an olive shimmer shade, especially in a palette that's already lacking a lighter transition kind of matte. And I really think that having something in there that was like a light orange, think Peach Smoothie from Makeup Geek or Orange Soda from ABH, I think that that would have been so helpful in this palette. It would have made it that much more easy to use, and I think it would have been very complementary to the other tones that are in here. So while I don't think it's a bad palette in that each shade taken on its own applies nicely and performs nicely, just when you only have 7 shades to work with and 4 of those are mattes and 1 is a pressed glitter, it makes it difficult to use the palette. So I did find that I had a very challenging time with this, and I really don't see myself using this palette on its own going forward. I really think that I'll be bringing in some other shades, maybe from the palette that I'm trying to hit pan on, the Shade and Light palette, because there are some of these more neutral mattes in there that I can play with to add versatility to this palette. So I have to say I am disappointed in this palette in that I can't really use it on its own. Other people might be able to, so I'm not saying that this is an unusable palette. Just for my own skill set, my own sense of creativity, and my own comfort level, this isn't the palette for me. I don't necessarily regret purchasing it because these are good shadows in and of themselves, but like I said, I will be bringing in other shades to work with this one. Now also there is a pressed glitter in this, and that's a bit of a bold choice to include in every palette in this year-long series because not everybody is a fan of pressed glitters. And then when you only have 7 shades and you include a pressed glitter, it just, in my opinion, takes away some of that versatility again. So while this could have been a palette that I could reach for over and over again for everyday wear at work, because although there is color, it's not obnoxious color. And that's not to take away from really bright, bold, colorful eyeshadow because I love the look of it. But for my profession and the role that I play, I have to be aware of how I'm viewed and what people's perception of me is. I represent other people. When I stand in a courtroom before a judge, I am representing my client. It's not my children that are the subject of discussion. It's not my family that's being divided. It's my clients. And if I show up with glitter all over the place and crazy graphic liner, while on Instagram that may look baller, the judge is going to look at that and sort of be distracted by it, and my client may lose confidence in my ability to properly represent them. So I have to be aware of that. And this is a color story that I would feel comfortable wearing to the office or to court, frankly, except that they've messed it up for me. Except that because of the choices that they've made in this color story, I've got a pressed glitter, which I'm not going to wear to work, and everything is going to look a little bit grungy and dramatic because everything is so deep. Yeah, I could go in with this and just put the champagne shade on my lid, but then I'm just using 2 shades out of 7, and again, the critique still stands that the palette's not particularly useful just on its own for the purposes that I need it to be. So at any rate, that's it. That's all I'm going to say about that. They can't all be winners. I'm not mad at it. I will continue to play with it, but just as its own collection of shades in one palette, I just don't find that it's very approachable or accessible for me. So there you have it, guys. Proof that, I'm not biased. I love BH Cosmetics, I truly do, but when a palette disappoints, I'm gonna say that it disappoints, and this one definitely does. So there it is. That is what I wanted to share with you guys today. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.